The practice of mindful breath has become popular in broader culture. You yourself may have practiced mindful breathing at a work meeting, in a yoga class, or any number of other settings. It's become so popular in secular culture that many people do not realize that there is a deep biblical basis for the practice of mindful breathing. I want to briefly introduce you to the true origins of mindful breathing. This is found in John chapter 20. At this point in the story, Jesus has been crucified, resurrected, and has even made some initial appearances to the disciples. However, the disciples are in a state of intense anxiety. Verse 19 states they were in the fear of the Jews. They were anxious about getting captured by the authorities. In fact, they were so anxious that the passage emphasizes they had locked the doors. The passage then describes Jesus appearing suddenly among them as they're huddled together in fear. Notice again that Jesus appears to them in the middle of their anxious state. Now pay close attention to what happens next, starting with verse 21. Verse 21 says, Jesus said to them again, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, even so I am sending you." And when he had said this, he breathed on them and said to them, "Receive the Holy Spirit." Jesus is being very mindful in his actions here. His action of breathing, it's very deliberate. It's not some throwaway random detail. This mindful breathing of Jesus physically embodies what's happening spiritually. Jesus is giving them the Holy Spirit. Jesus is about to leave the disciples physically and will not return until some unknown time in the future. The Holy Spirit is how the disciples will continue to be present with Jesus in the meantime. The same is true for us today. Jesus will return to us physically at some unknown point in the future. But in the meantime, we are not latchkey kids left alone. Jesus is still present to us now through the Holy Spirit. And Jesus shows us in John 20 that we can embody the presence of the Holy Spirit through the physical act of mindful breathing. The mindfulness of Jesus' breathing becomes even more apparent when you realize that Jesus here is tapping into a long tradition in the scriptures where God's sustaining, ever-present presence is embodied in breath. This is the tradition of calling God Ruach Elohim. Ruach is breath in Hebrew. Ruach Elohim is literally the breath of God. This tradition goes all the way back to Genesis 1, where the Spirit of God that hovers over creation is that very same Ruach Elohim. The connection between the physical act of breathing and the spiritual presence of God makes sense when you consider what breathing means for human beings. Our breath will quite literally always be present with us as long as we live. By definition, we will breathe as long as we are alive. This makes breathing an excellent physical expression of the spiritual always presence of Jesus. Through the Holy Spirit, the Ruach Elohim, the breath of God, Jesus is always present with us for as long as we are alive and beyond. Our breath is also present now. As you are listening to me now, you are breathing right now. This makes breathing an excellent physical expression of the now presence of Jesus. Through the Holy Spirit, Jesus is present right now in the present with you. So mindful breathing is how we physically enact the always and the now presence of Jesus. This is why Jesus-centered mindful breathing is a powerful defense against anxiety. The more we get present with Jesus in this way, the more we find ourselves able to resist anxiety's hijack into the future.